Hey, it's Lou Pimber. Welcome to Lou Pimber Speaks. I have a very, very special guest today. Very, very special guest today. I've been reading stories about this young lady's father for years, man, for years. But it wouldn't be right. It wouldn't be right if I didn't first read this gentleman Medal of Honor citation which he was a recipient of right here. Of course, you already know I'm talking about Roy P. Benavidez. You see the picture right up here. The world needs heroes, man. He was one of mine, just so you guys know. So, listen, here it is. Are you ready? Are you ready? Master Sergeant, then Sergeant Roy P. Benavides, United States Army, who distinguished himself by a series of daring and extremely valorous actions on 2 May 1968, while assigned to Detachment B-56, 5th Special Forces Group Airborne, 1st Special Forces, Republic of Vietnam. On the morning of 2 May 1968, a 12-man Special Forces reconnaissance team was inserted by helicopters in a dense jungle area west of Loc Ninh, Vietnam, to gather intelligence information about confirmed large-scale enemy activity. This area was controlled and routinely patrolled by the North Vietnamese Army. After a short period of time on the ground, the team met heavy enemy resistance and requested emergency evacuation. 3 helicopters attempted extraction but were unable to land due to intense enemy small arms and anti-aircraft fire. Sergeant Benavides was on the forward operating base in Loc Ninh, monitoring the operation by radio when these helicopters returned to offload wounded crew members and to assess aircraft damage. Sergeant Benavides voluntarily boarded a returning aircraft to assist in another extraction attempt. Realizing that all the team members were either dead or wounded and unable to move the pickup zone, he directed the aircraft to a nearby clearing while he jumped from the hovering helicopter and ran approximately 75 meters under withering small arms fire to the crippled team. Prior to reaching the team's position, he was wounded in his right leg, face, and head. Despite these painful injuries, he took charge, repositioning the team members and directing their fire to facilitate the landing of the extraction aircraft and loading of the wounded and dead team members. His team threw smoke canister to direct the aircraft to the team's position. Despite his severe wounds and under intense enemy fire, he carried and dragged half of the wounded team members to the awaiting aircraft. He then provided protective fire by running alongside the aircraft as it moved to pick up the remaining team members. As the enemy's fire intensified, he hurried to recover the body and classified documents of the team leader. When he realized the leader's body, Sergeant Benavides was severely wounded by small arms fire in the abdomen and grenade fragments in his back. At nearly the same moment, the aircraft pilot was mortally wounded and his helicopter crashed. Although in extremely critical condition due to his multiple wounds, Sergeant Benavides secured the classified documents and made his way back to the wreckage, where he aided the wounded out of the overturned aircraft, gathered the stunned survivors into a defensive perimeter. Under increasing enemy automatic weapons and grenade fire, he moved around the perimeter, distributing water and ammunition to his weary men, reinstilling in them a will to live and fight. Facing a buildup of enemy opposition with a beleaguered team, Sergeant Benavides mustered his strength, began calling in tactical airstrikes, and directed the fire from supporting gunships to suppress the enemy's fire, and so permitted another extraction attempt. He was wounded again in his thigh by small arms fire while administering first aid to a wounded team member, just before another extraction helicopter was able to land. His indomitable spirit kept him going as he began to ferry his comrades to craft. On his second attempt with the wounded, he was clubbed from additional wounds to his head and arms before killing his adversary. He then continued under devastating fire to carry the wounded to the helicopter. Upon reaching the aircraft, he spotted and killed 2 enemy soldiers who were rushed to the craft from an angle that prevented the aircraft door gunner from firing upon them. With little strength remaining, he made one last trip to the perimeter to ensure that all classified material had been collected or destroyed and to bring in the remaining wounded. Only then, in extremely serious conditions, from numerous wounds and lots of blood, did he allow himself to be pulled into the extraction aircraft. Sergeant Benavidez' gallant choice joined voluntarily his comrades who were in critical straits to expose himself constantly to withering enemy fire, and his refusal to be stopped despite numerous severe wounds saved the lives of at least 8 men. His fearless personal leadership, tenacious devotion to duty, and extremely valorous actions in the face of overwhelming odds were in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect the utmost credit on him and the United States Army. That's Sergeant Benavidez. All right. With that, we have his daughter, Yvette Benavides Garcia, here with us today. Yvette, welcome. Welcome to Lou Pimber Speaks. I want to thank you. How much how honored I am just to be talking to you. I read your father's story many, many years ago. I have one of the books. Love for you to share with you the books are as well today. But I want to welcome you. I want to thank you. I have to say this about you, by the way. For years, I've seen how you honor your father, how much you've honored his name, his heroics, his efforts, his love for country. So I want to say that to you, Beth. Welcome.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. That means a lot because sometimes I wonder if what I'm doing, I mean, I know it's being seen and heard, but I wonder, is what type of impact it's actually having. And no matter what, I do it because I realized a long time ago that I have to help keep his legacy going. So I have a younger brother and an older sister, and we've all decided, we've got to keep his legacy going through what we do and what we say and what we post. So the pleasure is all mine. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I've been watching this for years. I've been watching. I was like, wow, man. I think it's important that we continue sharing your father's story, so that people, one, obviously never forget his name. But the truth is this, Yvette, young men today, young women today, and probably as always, need to be inspired, you know?
I agree. Yeah, for sure. And especially in the climate that we live in today, they need something to cling on to, some hope, faith, determination, something that gets them inspired. And I know my dad's story is definitely doing that. And the only way we can continue to do that is by sharing his story. And so that's why I do what I do. That's why I post, and that's why I share his story whenever and wherever I can, because I know that I know that my dad is still saving lives even in death. So.
You
Thank
know,
you.
yeah, no, believe me, it's my honor. Tell me a little bit about your dad. Tell me about your dad. Where is he from originally? Tell me a little bit about his origin story. Who was Roy P. Benavides?
Yeah, so my dad was born in a little town called Lindenau, and it's right outside of Cuero, Texas. He eventually ended up retiring to El Campo, Texas. So Cuero, in relation to El Campo, is about an hour's drive. That town is between Victoria and Houston, Texas. So that's where my dad came from. When he was 5, his dad and both his dad and his mom contracted tuberculosis, and his father was the first one to pass. And before he passed, he had asked one of his brothers, Nicholas, if something ever happens to him, if he would please come and help to raise both of his boys. So my dad had a biological brother, Roger, and when the time came for his dad to pass, his mother ended up remarrying another man, Pablo Chavez. And this man, it was pretty apparent that he did not care for my dad or his brother. So my dad lived with his mom and Pablo for another 4 or 5 years. So he didn't go immediately to his adoptive uncle. He stayed with his mother, but it was pretty apparent that he wasn't getting, I guess, the type of raising that he needed in life. And he ran away several times his uncle ended up taking him even though his mother was still alive, and he ended up running away, because he wanted, I guess, the love of his mother, but he was never getting it to full extent because of Pablo Chavez. So my dad, did run away twice from his adoptive father, Nicholas, and ultimately his mother ended up passing by the time he was 10, and so he did come and live with his uncle for good.
Wow, wow. And I read somewhere that your dad was quite the scrapper. Is that true?
Yeah, and I think that's why his story resonates with so many people and why he's so inspiring to people is because anybody and everybody can probably touch on my dad's life in any facet. He was a fighter. If you looked at him wrong, he was going to want to fight you. He kinda had a bad attitude about life in general, and I think it was because he lost both of his parents at a young age, and he was a school dropout. So, he worked out in the fields with his adopted family. They were already a family of 9, one had passed away, so they were a large family nonetheless, and they had to help earn their keep there, and so they were like a migrant family. They traveled from city to city, state to state looking for jobs, and
Yeah.
my dad would go with them. He was working out in the fields early in the morning and then walking to school, trying to pay attention, falling asleep in class, and then going back out into the fields to continue the work that he was doing. So, my dad lived a hard life and he was small in stature. He had a lazy eye. He spoke Spanish. A lot of people made fun of him not only for the color of his skin, he was half a Yaqui Native American and Mexican American, and then, just a lot of things place, in his life, and he just, I don't know, was made fun of for that and just lived a really, really hard life.
What year was he was born what year?
He was born in 1935, so
Wow,
he
okay,
grew
okay.
up in the late 30s, early 40s.
Okay, so during that time, yeah, Hispanics had some challenges going. Was he
Yeah,
born in
a
the
lot.
US or was he born
Yes.
in Mexico? What
Yes,
about
he
his
was
parents?
born
Where
in
were they born? On Mexican side or
and
US?
no, no, they were, well, his mother was from Mexico, yes, but his father was in the United States, born
You got it.
in the
Yeah,
United
'cause during
States.
that time, yeah, all the way up until even, like, the '60s or something like that, like, late '50s, a lot of Hispanics weren't even allowed to speak English,
Right,
you
right, and,
know?
he also ate tacos for breakfast and lunch, and so he was made fun of that. I mean, he was just
I love
constantly being
tacos
made
with
fun
bread.
of. I
I love
know.
tacos with bread.
Now it's a good thing, but back then, I think he got made fun of a lot.
Yeah, yeah. You know what's interesting is that even though all those things happened to your dad, I don't think he allowed it 100% to keep him down. He
No,
was a
for sure
fighter.
not. No, no, no. Right, and that's why I think he was a fighter because he wasn't gonna let people degrade him or make fun of him, he was gonna fight them, and
Yeah,
so but that fighting, he needed to, kinda make sure that he wasn't fighting really harshly, I guess, and
yes.
really hurting these people, but yeah, he needed to turn that anger a different way, and
Yeah, yeah,
thus, that's why he joined the military.
for sure. So, in the lineage of children, where are you in the middle or where
I'm
age
the
are you?
middle child, I'm the one who's always forgotten. Yeah, yeah.
And so there's an older brother, I believe you said?
An older sister, Denise, and a younger
Okay.
brother, Noel, and we're about 3.5 years in age. We're all, spaced out 3.5 years.
Okay, got it. So your dad at some point decides to join the army, right? But
He
he
did.
joined the Army National Guard in Texas.
He did. He was working at a tire store, and while he was at that tire store just doing odd things, handing wrenches and things to the mechanics and sweeping up and cleaning up, and he had a mentor there, and that mentor would read the Bible to my dad and speak the Bible to my dad, and there came a time when some recruiters would come in and put their posters, on the walls
Yeah.
inside of the tire store, and my dad at this time was still a fighter, obviously, and when I say a fighter, he was getting into trouble a lot.
Right.
So at one point, he saw one of the posters and decided, hey, I don't want to work in this environment all my life. He had his eyes on my mom. They kind of grew up together, but didn't, they weren't dating or anything, and he wanted to date her. And so he knew that she came from a family where, her father was not going to appreciate the type of life that he was leading. So he knew that he needed to change his life around. So he decided to join the Texas National Guard, and he did, and he stayed in for 3 years. But he liked it so much that he wanted to make it the Army, the military, a career, and then he decided to join the Army.
So he got in, he went active duty, a regular army. And when he went in, was he at some point he was a medic and then he was an MP or something like that, right?
He was an MP, yes, and that's where he got his first placement was being an MP, and then from there, but I have to say that I think and a lot of the things that I've learned in life are, things that I've learned along this journey of getting to know my dad, because my dad never really talked about certain things, and surely I didn't ask because, I was a kid. I wasn't
You're the
gonna
middle kid.
I guess it just didn't, interest me. My dad's life didn't interest me growing up, sadly to say, I guess. But anyway, I found out that I want to say that he tried to join the Marines, but he didn't make it because of his height. And so he went to the Army. And the Army was like, we'll take you.
Got it. And
Yeah.
so they said, "You're too short, go next door." And good, good. I mean, there's so much more you can accomplish in the army. Hey, I'm a little partial. I am partial. All right. But
Me too.
you mentioned something kind of interesting. When you were a kid, you weren't all that interested in your dad's life.
Well, and it's not that I wasn't interested, it's just I saw him just as a dad. Yeah, yeah, he was just dad, and he didn't bring his work home, so to speak. So, he still went to my softball games, and he still parented us and, made fun of us and joked around, and we went on family vacations, and so his military way of life was not paramount or prominent when growing up, so I didn't think to ask. I mean, I knew that he struggled. I knew he was in the military, but he was retired. So in my mind, that was behind him. He was a retired Army veteran. And so I did see him struggle to get up in the mornings. I saw him struggle to walk. I mean, I saw those things, but not once did I ever put two and two together. I pretty much
Right.
thought, okay, it's probably just old age. That's what happens when you get older.
Yeah. That's just the way a kid thinks usually, you know what I mean? But
I think
interesting
so.
how that just gives us an example of there are some serious heroes walking amongst us, you know? And these men and these women carry the scars, the wounds, the injuries, and we don't see it. We just see the shell of a broken man, probably a depressed man, or whatever the case may be, whatever we want to call it. But if we ask a little, if we dig a little bit, many times we realize, wow, there are some stories behind uh, these injuries. So let's talk about that for a little bit, all right?
Okay.
Your pops, it's kind of a big deal, right? Right up here. He reminds you of a guy I was in the military with, a guy named Juan Urbina. Looks a lot like him. Also Native American Yaqui. And it's interesting when I think about your dad's story and the way he looks, and I've heard him speak on videos. He just reminds me of so many dudes I grew up around. You know, even men today. I have a good friend named Andy Loza, who was a partner of mine when I was undercover in Army. Very similar to him, tough as nails kind of guy. He was in the Marines and a Yaqui Mexicano. You know what I mean? Tough dude. And it reminds me of other guys that I either served in the military and stuff like that. Your dad was an everyman, you know, but a very unique everyman. So the citation I just read for the Medal of Honor, this is amazing, by the way, but that's not all of it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
The tail end of it, the middle
Yeah.
part of it. Right? So early on, as he's serving in the military, I think now as a MP, I believe, or perhaps in some infantry unit, he steps on a landmine or something. Is that correct?
True. He does his first tour in 1966 in Vietnam. And shortly after the mission started, he is walking through the jungles and he steps on a landmine. And the landmine just obviously, the jolt of it catapulted him so many feet and yards away. He was unconscious and he is flown back to the States, and a lot of the every time that he was flown back to BAMC, which is Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, and so he was eventually flown there, and it is there that he spent 9.5 months in the hospital trying to recuperate, trying to walk again, and of course, they told him that he was never going to walk again, and they did not want to do any kind of therapy for him to try to get his hopes up. And so the therapy that he was prescribed was therapy to try to live as a paralyzed person. So, try to help him do therapy in the wheelchair. This is how you're going to live your life. You need to
Yeah.
learn how to do things as you're in a wheelchair. And so my dad obviously did not want to take that as a diagnosis. And so, as the story goes, he would wake up in the middle of the night. They did have him heavily drugged because of the things that he was doing. He was waking up in the middle of the night and he was dragging himself to the floor, and
Wow.
he would go prop himself up between two tables that were near the beds, and he would try to, bring himself up, position himself so that he could put a little bit of pressure on his legs and try to see if he could maneuver himself into a standing position. And he would do that night after night after night. And it got to the point where his room buddies were making bets to see whether or not he would stand. But, you know, with the cheerings that were going on in the middle of the night, the nurses would get a hold of that and they would pop him another pill to try to sedate him. And they didn't want my dad to hurt himself because obviously if he would have fallen, it would have re injured himself. So my dad, any waking chance that he got, he was doing that type of therapy. And the doctors had already written him off saying, when you get out of here, you're going to do a desk job. And my dad begged and pleaded and said, if I can prove to you that I can walk again, will you tear up those orders? And the doctor was like, just to appease him, said, sure, I'll do that, but you got to walk out of here. And so he proved everybody wrong. And I find it even more inspiring because in this day and age, we have modern technology and devices that help people who are told they're never going to walk again, machineries and therapies geared towards walking again. And my dad didn't have all that. All he had was pure determination, faith, and grit. So, yeah, my dad walked out of there. He walked out of there with a limp, and he walked out of there with my mom by his side, but he did walk out of that hospital.
Wow. 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 Wow.
And then trained for the special forces and then did his mission.
That's safe. So your dad is in the hospital. They say you're not gonna walk again, dude. You need to you need to rest. You need to get well and prepare yourself for a different life. And he says, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Like, I'm not gonna take that as the final judgment, no.
You mentioned a very important person right now because every strong man, every successful man, there's always somebody right there. Tell me about your
Yeah.
mom. Let's hear about your mom a little bit.
My mom is the silent hero of the story.
Yeah.
She's very shy, very quiet, did not ever want to be in the limelight. She was a beautiful woman, and I always took pride in knowing that she was fair skinned and had freckles and blue green eyes. And she was just a beautiful woman who was quiet in nature,
Yeah.
and she loved my father, and it wasn't until after she passed that I really truly got to know her as well and their love story. And looking through old photos, my dad would send her photos. My dad really wouldn't send her letters, which I'm kind of sad that I don't have letters that he wrote her, or maybe he did, but my mother is so private she probably destroyed them. But we do have pictures, and he would write on the back of some of those pictures, to my one and only Lala, and her
Really.
name was Ilaria, but he called her Lala, and that was his affectionate name for her.
Hilaria Benavides.
Yes,
Yes,
Coy
that's
was her
a lot.
maiden name.
When did she pass away?
She passed in 2019, right before COVID hit, and she had dementia. She suffered from dementia for 5 years. And before dad passed, he was all about us taking care of mom. And he made us promise that we would take care of our mother. And so my brother, sister, and I, when the onset of the dementia hit, we had decided that we were all going to take care of her. And so for 5 years, we kind of took care of her. One night I would have her, 2 nights my sister would have her, another night my brother. We took turns taking care of her. And we did that for 5 years. We devoted our time, our energy, everything to our mother. And then finally, in the last year of her life, we had to put her in a nursing home because it got to the point where we could no longer help her in the medical way that she needed to be
Yeah.
helped. And so, but we did fulfill my father's dream and we took care of her like he
Wow.
wanted us to.
Good for you guys. So your father leaves the hospital walking.
Yes.
He was like, the doctor says, if you can leave here walking, I will rip up these papers.
Yes.
And so he did. He left. He
He
walked out of that
left.
hospital. Good
He
for him.
walked out of there
That's
for
incredible.
sure.
Incredible.
It is.
And so now he leaves, he's still in the army, and he says, I wanna how did what made him join special forces? How did that come about? Do you know?
You know, he had friends who were in the special forces, and one of his friends was a man who actually ended up being my godfather, Tom Gloria. And Tom was in the special forces, and I'm sure he had these men in his life who he just were inspired by himself. And he probably thought the love that I have for my fellow man, for my soldiers, for my brothers in arms, and for the military, I've got to bump it up a notch. And so he did decide to join the special forces and trained for it for about 16 months and ended up, earning his certification, his Green Beret.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, he earned the distinction.
That's incredible. And so in the special forces, was his MOS, was he a combat medic in this? Was he an SF medic, or what was his MOS then? Do you know?
No, he went in as a probably
Weapons sergeant?
a weapons specialist and a linguist.
That's right. Because he
Yeah.
spoke a few different languages, right?
He did, he did. He spoke, I've counted all the languages that I knew that he spoke, which was about 14. However, he did not speak them, he could speak them well enough to get by, but nonetheless,
Wow.
he did learn 14 different languages, and he did speak. He jokes about how he spoke German with a Spanish, with Texan accent, Southern accent. Yeah, he spoke French, German, Spanish, English, Vietnamese,
Wow.
Japanese. So, yeah,
That's incredible.
a brilliant man, and that's why he's so inspiring, and that's why I think when, uh, when people are down and out and they think, "Oh, I can't do this, I can't do that," I always encourage them to read my dad's books or watch a video and just be inspired because, we really truly can do anything that we set our mind to, and he's proof of that.
On that point, Yvette, what are some I know I have this one. This is called Legend, written by
Yes.
Eric Blem. It says,
Here's some more behind me.
what name them? Can you name them? What are they?
Yes. So he has The Three Wars of Roy Benavides, and that was the first book that he co-authored. And
Okay.
that's written by Oscar Griffin and my dad. And then he has a Medal of Honor, which is I think now it's listed as Medal of Honor, One Man's Journey from Poverty to Prejudice. And that is written by John Craig and my dad. And then there's The Last Medal of Honor, which was written by Pete Billack, and I think that's out of production, so I don't think you can get that. And then there is the children's book that I wrote, which is Tango Mike Mike, the story of Master Sergeant Roy P. Benavides. And we can go into the reasons why I wrote that. And
Yeah.
then there's Legend by Eric Blem. And then the last one, the most recent one, is called The Ballad of Roy Benavides. And that is written by Dr. William Sturkey.
Tell me a little before we get into what happened in Vietnam and everything post that. Tell me about this book you wrote, the Tango Mike Mike.
Okay, so, I'm an educator and I've spent the last 25 years in education. I am on the last 20 days before I retire. So I am retiring in May 22nd. But
Nice.
anyway, the reason why I wrote this book is because I've taught first grade and I've taught fourth grade. Those are the only two grades that I've ever taught. And it was during a time when I was teaching fourth grade that my students would always ask me, "Is there anything about your dad that we can read? Are there videos that we can watch?" And there were a couple of videos at that time. And the books that had been written about my dad all had specific types of language. And my dad was a huge proponent of, if I'm going to write a book, I don't want bad language to be in those books because he knew that students would eventually be reading them. Of course, we all know how, publishers are, and having a few cuss words here and there is what sells. So my dad never won that battle. But I never quite felt comfortable referring these students to these books because of the language and because these books are about 300 pages long. And so, even though I'm a dyslexic interventionist and a reading specialist and I help students read, I do not like to read myself. And so, growing up, books like that would turn me off, to tell you the truth. And I think because maybe I struggled with reading myself and I struggled with comprehension. And so I knew that reading books like that are a huge turnoff for students, especially students who can't read. And
Yeah.
so one day, my own 2 kids said, "When are you gonna write a book about grandpa?" And so one time, I did. I'm trying to make this as short as possible, but I took a New Jersey writing class, and in that class, I was challenged to write a personal narrative writing piece, which I did about my dad, and, an expository writing piece. And so I wrote also an expository writing piece. That particular writing piece, I chose to write about my dad and his struggles with diabetes, which ultimately took his life, and I got it published in Hispanic magazine. And so that was kind of like the light bulb in my brain to go, wow, you can perhaps write, and people are inspired by what you're writing. So when I got back home, my kids and Morgan both were like, when are you going to write a book about grandpa? And I said, you know what? Right now. And so I did. I sat down at the computer and I wrote a book, and I decided, you know, I wanted to do this for my school kids as well. I wanted to write a short, sweet, simple, to the point book where they could get the gist of his life, his story, and be inspired by it. So I couldn't find a publisher. It's called Tango Mike Mike, the story of Master Sergeant Roy P. Benavidez. I couldn't get it published anywhere, and so I decided to do self-publishing, and I self-published it. And it is available on Amazon.
All right. That's awesome. Congratulations to you on that.
Thank you.
I'm gonna order some. I'm gonna have
Okay.
some couple young men in my life that are very dear to me. My wife's got a couple little grandsons. Cats in particular would love to read that.
Yeah.
And so I'm gonna have
And
them
it
read it.
is. It's for our young kids, although I have been told by many adults that it's also for the young at heart. So I was reminded that a lot of adults like to read children's books as well. So it's not just for the kids who struggle to read, but it's for anybody. But it doesn't go into his upbringing per se, and it doesn't go into a lot of things that he struggled with or the things that he did afterwards. It's just, like I said, short, sweet, simple, and to the point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I totally get it. I'm an author as well. This is my book, Breaking Badly: A Post-Traumatic Success Story. So I'm an author as well.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's on Amazon.
And
I'll
I
make
will
sure
order that
you
book as well.
I'll get you
Thank
a
you.
copy, by the way, as well. So listen, man, let's go back about let's talk about that mean Mexican, Tango Mike Mike.
Yeah.
So he's in Vietnam, police special forces selection. He's assigned to an ODA. He's on a team, goes back to Vietnam, and on that particular day, an incident had occurred before that, right? Where they were on a line,
McGuire
a
rig,
wire
yes.
line, a spy line,
Yeah,
right? And what
yes.
happened?
So, when he was on that particular mission, the McGuire rig, it's 2 nylon ropes, and so the ropes it was bringing up my dad and another man, and as they were bringing them up with the helicopter, the ropes got tangled, and so they started to twist, and as they were twisting, they started to burn. So they were, the ropes were about to let loose of my father and the guy who was next to him. So Leroy Wright hoisted himself out of the helicopter and risked his life to untangle the ropes, and was
Wow.
basically, yeah, more than half of his body was hanging out of the helicopter to do this. And so, had Leroy Wright not done that, my father would have dropped to his death. And so, obviously, my dad had that in the back of his mind when the May 2nd mission came, which was on May 2nd, 1968. My dad was not supposed to be on that mission, but he heard a distress call. My dad was attending a church service, and that's one thing about my dad. He was a devout Catholic and never missed church, and so it was just appropriate and most fitting that that's what he was attending in the jungles of Vietnam. So he was attending a church service, and he overheard on the radio a distress call and saying, "Get us out of here. We need help." He went over to the radio man and asked what team was that was out there, and the guy said, he couldn't tell at the time who it was, but he did mention, "I think it's that man who saved your life, Leroy Wright. The other day, it's his team." And so
Wow.
without hesitation, my dad didn't even think twice, didn't think about the wife that he had at home, the parents, his adopted parents, the family, the child that he also had, which was my older sister. He put that aside, and he decided, I'm gonna go and try to help him. And so he grabbed the closest thing to him was a medic bag, and all he had was his Bowie knife, and so he jumped aboard that helicopter. He was told not to get on, and they said, "No, we can't take you. You're not supposed to be on this mission. We have people who, who are going to be doing this on this day."
Yeah.
And my dad said, "No, get me there." So,
So let me go take you back a little bit. So he wasn't even supposed to be on. Now the rumor was he part of the Mac VSOG type units that were
yes.
out northern Vietnam
Yes.
that they didn't that didn't exist?
Right.
He was
Yeah, it
part
was
of it. It was
all under yes. It was all
very
undercover, top
clandestine, very
secret.
top secret. Yeah. Okay. So
Top secret.
they were there doing their thing. He hears over the radio there's a problem, but then he realizes that Leroy was there. Is that correct?
Right. He realized that Leroy was the team leader of that mission. And
Got it.
so he knew that Leroy had some top secret, identification papers material on him.
Yeah.
And he knew that if something's going on with Leroy, I got to save his life most importantly, but I also have to get those documents.
So he was loyal to Leroy because Leroy had saved his life beforehand.
Very loyal, very
So he
loyal.
goes, when you read the citation, they only have so many words to put in these things, right? Because the
I
president
know.
has to read in front of a bunch of people. I mean, this is great. The citation's great. Dude, they got me all misty-eyed at the end, you know what I mean? But the
I
thing
know.
is this,
Yes.
man, when you watch the stories, when you read the stories, what he did is what he did going without a rifle, he took a
Exactly.
knife.
Without machinery, machine guns.
He took a knife and an aid bag because a friend needed help in somewhere in northern Vietnam. That's
Right,
incredible.
and let me point out, my dad is a huge he was a huge proponent of never look at one's skin,
Yeah.
and he said the only colors you need to be concerned about are red, white, and blue. And let
Eh,
me point out that Leroy Wright was an African American. And so
okay.
if that doesn't show you what the love of brotherhood is
Oh,
amongst
yeah.
these men, then, it didn't matter the color of their skin. My dad was going to save anybody's life, and it just so happened that, Leroy happened to be on that team.
Let me tell you, in the military, we're
You
all
don't look
green.
at that here.
We're all
Exactly.
we're all soldiers.
You
You're
get
absolutely
it.
right.
Exactly.
So he goes on this mission. This is nuts. When you read the citation, you watch the other interviews, you read the books. What he did is it's I don't think I have enough words in my vocabulary. They didn't have enough words in this here to describe what he did. It's so
Exactly.
far-fetched. It sounds so far-fetched. It sounds so incredible that moments of this that are listed in the citation have been shown in movies over generations. Just little glimpses of it. You know what I mean? Like, wait a minute, I saw that in Rambo. Wait a minute, I saw this in here. Wait a minute, the guy jumps off a helicopter to go aid his men. He secures men. He secures body. He secures equipment, classified equipment. He doesn't leave his men behind. He gets stabbed. He gets shot. He gets clubbed over the head. And then in between all that, he's probably he's got like 30, 40, 50 some odd wounds on him.
57.
57. He's put in a body bag at some
Well,
point. Go
before that, let me just tell you, he loads everybody into the chopper. And
Yeah.
then as they're taking off, the pilot gets killed, mortally wounded, and it crashes. So now my dad has to take everybody that he just loaded and run across to another awaiting helicopter. So he didn't just do it once, he did it twice. In the meantime, suffering from his own wounds. In the end, his intestines were hanging out. And so that is what's even incredible to hear, is that his intestines were hanging out. And I know that to be a fact only because as a young child, I saw the wounds on his body, and he had a wound that went from the front of his belly button all the way to the back. It was a huge, and you could just see the stitches, the markings of where the stitches were. So, yeah, my dad had half of his body was cut open, and all the while, running through the jungles of Vietnam with, thousands of NBA shooting at him, stabbing him, clubbing him, uh, hand-to-hand combat, cut in the face, the mouth. My dad had a mark right here on his mouth. I mean, my dad, in retrospect, these are the wounds that I remember seeing on my dad, and it's all just wounds of war. Yeah. But yeah, so when my dad finally
Can I touch on that for a minute? Can I touch
Uh-huh.
on that? Hold that
Yeah.
thought.
Yeah.
As a child, you see we as a child, when you see your dad without a shirt, right? See that
Yeah.
without you see that without a shirt, and you see that, and when a child, you have this idea of dad. My dad is
Mhm.
Superman. My dad is this. My
Mhm.
dad is as a girl, as a little baby, as a little boy, whatever. Your father is everything in the world. But then you see the
Yes.
scars on your father's back, on his body. What goes
Yeah.
through your mind? Like, what did you see?
I saw the stab wounds, I saw every scar that is listed in the books that say where he was clubbed and stabbed and bayoneted. I saw that. And it's just it brings about a little bit of sadness to know that your father had to go through, endure that type of war, wounds. And as an adult, I feel even more saddened by it, that the love of man, the love of country, he was willing to risk that because not only was he risking that, but he was also risking mental fortitude, his mindset afterwards and having to relive that and just the struggles that come with that, getting up to walk. Yeah, it's just it's disheartening, it's sad, and then squeezed obviously in there is that sense of pride that that's my dad, and
Yeah,
I'm so proud of everything that he did, and
yeah.
that he did do what he did, that he risked his life, and that he had that paramount love of country, to risk everything.
That's so profound. So the pilot shot. He now has to evacuate the people he just saved into
Yes.
another helicopter. He's got to go
Yes.
to the other chopper.
Yes.
And so what happened then?
He ends up loading several men. I don't know exactly how many, but I do know that he also loaded 3 enemy soldiers because in his mind, he was like, "I didn't wanna leave anybody behind." And
Just
so
to
when
move
he
forward.
finally gave them the thumbs up, because obviously he wanted to go back. He
Yeah.
wanted to go back and bring more, but they basically had to say no, and so he gave them the thumbs up, and when he did, he was regurgitating on his own blood. He had his eyes were swollen shut, blood caped everywhere, and the blood was drying. So he had a locked jaw. His jaw was broken, so he couldn't talk. He couldn't do anything. His heart, rate was so slow. He was on the verge of death, but he remembers that as he was gurgling, the blood that was in trying to get down his throat, that they thought he was struggling to breathe. And so they were about to do a tracheotomy on him. And my dad jokingly says in some speeches later, he's like, when I saw them want to do that trach, I was just like, I had had enough for one day. It's like,
Gee.
really? Now you want to do a trach on me? So I don't know how he motioned them not to do it, but they ended up not doing it. But yeah. And so,
So I read that he spit on the medic, or at least
yeah,
spit toward one.
Yeah, that wasn't until obviously when they started to unload the helicopter. So when they started to unload, they started to put the dead in a pile and the living in a pile. And so my dad was put in the pile of the dead. Number one, because of the way he looked, like physically, he was bloodied, couldn't move. His heart rate was very low. I mean, they thought he was dead. And also because he had Asian features. And so he looked as if he was probably a Viet Cong, and
Swollen
so
vehicle.
they yeah, yeah, and so they were putting him amongst the dead, and so when they did that, they were starting to put the dead in body bags, and the body bags were created in such a way that they were a tight seal because when the bodies are in there for long periods of time, they didn't want them to start smelling of decay and all that. So, he knew that once that body bag he was starting to be zipped up. He knew once it was finally sealed that that was it. He would suffocate to death. And so Jerry Cottingham had seen that that was my dad. He noticed and he said, "Hey, that's Benavidez. He's not." Like they were putting the dead Viet Cong in one pile, and they like, "Hey, he's not the enemy. He's one of ours." And so when they put him amongst the dead, I guess that were Americans, the medic came, I guess, to give his final assessment of him, and when he reached down to check his heart, my dad is thinking this whole time, "Look, I'm already in a body bag. Once he gives that final, you know, reading of I'm dead, that's it." And so as he was bending down, my dad made the luckiest shot that he's ever made, and he spit in his face. And I actually got to meet Lee Martin, who was the medic. And he's still alive, and he talks about his story. And I do have a YouTube video of him talking about it. My dad's teeth were broken,
Yeah.
and so when he reached down to look at my dad, he could see something in his mouth wiggling. It was my
Yeah.
dad's tongue. My dad was trying to communicate with his tongue through his teeth, and so that's when he shot through that gaping
Wow.
hole in his teeth. Yeah. Yeah.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Yes, and my dad had God by his side. My dad was a faithful man. My mother prayed to Saint Christopher. She pinned him with the Christopher medal before he left, and he wore a Saint Michael medallion. So we come from a very strong family of faith. We pray to our saints for intercession. um, I know that my dad had God by his side. My dad said that he did the sign of the cross so many times on that mission that you would have thought his own hands were helicopter propellers. So my dad, yeah, had faith.
Let me tell you something. When the movie comes out, I want to play Roy Benavides. Let me tell you. Hey, let me just plug myself right now. Can we do a plug?
Okay,
I got a very similar. I got scars on my face.
you
Okay,
do.
I got a big scar on my side as well. I got to
That
serve.
was one of the first things I noticed.
I
Yes,
got I have to serve in the military. Okay, I speak Espanol, so I'm auditioning right now. Okay, I'm auditioning. You have any
and you do
say
favor
anything?
him.
Give me that thumbs up. And
Yes.
wow, what an incredible story. And so he comes home. Uh, he's he's in the hospital. And how long was that recovery for him?
The recovery was probably about 3 months, maybe.
Hmm.
You would think it would be, longer, but it was about 3 or 4 months, I think. Yeah, after that, he ended up, retiring, shortly after that, but or actually, I guess, a couple years later, 1975, I think, is when he ultimately retired, and that was 1968. But yeah, my dad is an incredible example of what faith, determination, grit is all about. Never give up
When he
attitude.
came home, even after he got better, he still fought some more. He fought for the rights of
He
other
did.
troops to receive their medical
Social
disability.
Security. Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So when my dad came home and he ultimately retired to our hometown of El Campo, he received a letter in the mail saying that his Social Security benefits were going to be cut off. And so when my dad was I guess when he retired, he was, I think it was considered 100% disabled, but I think he was classified as 80%, if I'm not mistaken. So, nonetheless, my dad could not hold a 9 to 5 job being in retirement. And now he's being told that his benefits are going to be cut and he was going to have to go out and get a job. But not only did my dad receive that letter, thousands of others received that letter. And so when word got out that my dad was going to fight for his own right to receive those benefits, word got out that hundreds of thousands were also, going to be stripped of their benefits. He decided to go before Congress and speak. But prior to that, my dad had to prove to medical experts and psychiatrists that he was 100% disabled. And that was another to his injuries because he had
Yeah.
to do stress tests. He had to get on walking machines to prove that he couldn't walk for long periods of times. He had to prove that he could not get up from a sitting position. I mean, he just basically had to prove that he was disabled.
You
And
know,
what was
and
sad, go ahead.
no, that's so humiliating to make you go through that over again.
Yeah,
To make you
it really
show
was.
me that you're really injured. Show me that you're really hurt. Show me. Yeah, go
Exactly. Exactly. But even more sad was that there are people in this world, neighbors who lived down our street and just people who lived in our town who saw him on a daily basis, who were like, "Well, I see him get up and go walk at the park. I see him driving
Yeah.
around town. If he can get up and walk, and if he can get up and drive, then he can sit down at a 9 to 5 job and work at a desk and do something." So my dad had to fight that type of discrimination, that type of hatred. And even to this day, our family, we are the legacy of Roy Benavides. We, not so much as we have in past years, but it still shows its ugly head that people are jealous of not only my father, but what he stood for. And so we do get a lot of ugly, hateful remarks sometimes, and it's just sad. But, we have strong, thick skin. Obviously, these people don't know who our father is because my father survived so many things in life, and so are we his children. So we just kind of brush it off. But that's the
Well,
world we live in.
it is. So we're kind of touching on now is the whole life post service, right? And so people expect the injured warrior, the injured. I retired from law enforcement on a medical situation, injuries that I sustained, right? And so people expect you to be like that, the statistic people expect you to be broken down on the street, and so they can look at you and say, "See, look, I told you." But
Mhm.
when you're doing your very best to fight and putting your best foot forward, best face that you can, people say stuff.
Yeah.
And you know what? Let them say stuff. The
Yeah.
worry when they stop saying stuff about you. But he had the courage to stand up before Congress, and because
He
of that
did.
testimony he gave, they were able to reverse. So they were trying to take away
Yes.
Social Security benefits in
Yes.
lieu of the
His Social
medical
Security.
in lieu of
His Social
the
Security
VA.
benefits. Yeah. So,
Wow,
yeah.
that's
So,
terrible.
he did go before Congress and he did speak, and they ended up giving him and the hundreds of thousands of other people their disability
Good.
back. Yeah.
So he was part of that initial group that really put his foot forward to help support modern day veterans today who receive a lot of disability, right? And who
Right.
deal with
Sure.
post-traumatic stress. What do you know, if you know, what was your dad's life post-service in terms of any issues related to post-traumatic stress? How did he cope with that? Were there any things that happened?
Yeah, my dad, in retrospect, I do believe that he did have post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah,
My brother and sister and I talk about the little things that we remember in one of the books. But, my brother and sister might have different views and takes on what they saw. I can only speak about what I saw. But at the time, I clearly did not recognize it as being post traumatic stress disorder or anything. I just saw it as a protective father. My father has always been protective of us, his family, from as long as I can remember. He would literally drive us to school, and he never went the same route. And so my dad was the guy who would drive us to school, and it was just a straight shot down the street, but yet he always went through different, neighborhoods and stuff.
yeah,
And as a little kid, the nosy kid that I am, I'd ask him, why are we, you're only supposed to get on this one road. Why are you taking the long route? And my dad's response was, oh, you can't be too careful. Hey, or let's go look at what's going on over here, or I saw something the other day. So he always had a reason why we were doing that. And it's only for me, like, retrospectfully, I think that, maybe he just, wanted to be careful, maybe some things that were going on in life prior to.
you know,
As a veteran, you probably can understand why
totally.
he chose to do that.
Yeah, totally,
Yeah. Yeah.
totally get it.
My dad
That
was the type of
hypervigilance,
person.
called hypervigilance. You become very
Yes,
hyper
hypervigilant.
vigilant, even
There you
when
go.
there seems to be nothing going on, and there probably isn't. But you can never be too careful.
Exactly.
And if left unchecked, it leads to other things, this unprovoked anger, unprovoked moods, excessive drinking, excessive risk taking. It evolves into so many things.
Yes.
So at that time, they didn't really call it post-traumatic stress. They call it other things. Do you know if your dad received help for that? How did that work?
No, I don't believe he did. I mean, to my understanding, I don't think he ever did. But, other things, like my dad was the type of person who you couldn't come up and just, like, try to startle, like kids like to do, like come up behind a parent and kind of
Yeah,
scare
yeah,
them.
yeah. No,
We
don't do that to
definitely
Roy.
couldn't we could not do that to dad. And if we were out, it was very, very rare that we went out to dinner at a restaurant. My mother always had a meal for us at the house. And I don't know if that's just the time era that everybody lived in, but I know from financial point of view, my parents were very financially stable and were
Yeah,
very smart with their money. So they didn't spend it, on eating out a lot. If they didn't have the cash to buy something, they weren't going to buy it. So
right, right.
when on the very few times that we were at a restaurant, I do remember if like a waiter came in and, broke dishes, or dropped something, my dad was very startled by it, and so
Yeah,
he never sat with his back towards the door. He always had to see, who was coming in, who was going out, little things like that. My sister remembers him walking the perimeters of our house just to make sure everything was okay. I don't remember that, but she talks about that. I do remember him having these windows installed in the house that you could see out, but people could not see in. And so his reasoning for that was he wanted to save on electricity because they were tinted. So, again, maybe that was the reason, but I don't know. My dad was always looking, peering out the windows. And so I it could be post traumatic stress disorder. I don't know. But my dad, like I said, never let us see any type of struggling that he ever went through in life. He
yeah,
put up such a great, for lack of a better word, he put up such a great front,
yeah.
and we never saw him struggle mentally. We did physically, but not mentally or anything like that.
As we wrap up this conversation, a lot of stuff we discussed a lot of things, and I didn't want to recount again the heroics of your father. They've been told so many times, there's so many books, and I didn't want to mess it up, you know what I mean? But I did want to capture the essence of who Roy P. Benavides was, and to you who he is, right? Because you guys have made it a point to make sure that the name, reputation, the lore never dies, and the Green Beret community love him. I've spoken to other Green Berets about him. They love him.
That's
They know
great.
exactly who he is. I don't. I listened to so many Medal of Honor recipient citations. None of them have come as close to this to his because I think that realistically, I think your dad could have got maybe one or two of them. You know what I mean? And so one of the key factors I think in your dad's life was probably he found a mentor early in life, right? And
Yes.
he found a woman that supported and respected and honored him and gave him three incredible children, right?
Yes. Yes.
And what do you think is the legacy of Roy P. Benavidez, Master Sergeant?
I think his legacy is one of never quit, never give up. My dad had so many things happen in his life where he could have and should have thrown in the towel, and given up on life or given up on living, just giving up on society as a whole. But my dad persevered and he ended up turning a life that was going down the wrong path. My dad was one day away from being sent to a boys' home because of his bad attitude and behavior. And we see this all the time in kids. As an educator, I see these types of kids on a daily basis who struggle. They might, for whatever reason, they're fighters. They don't like to be told what to do, so they're always in ISS or DAEP, out of school suspension. I see these kids who struggle to learn because they might have ADD, ADHD, dyslexia, or special. I see these kids, and my dad was that type of person as well. My dad struggled in life. He struggled to where even, didn't have money for clothes. So I just want people to know that no matter the situation, no matter the upbringing, you can still carry on in life. You can still be inspired and educated by the people who you come across. And
Yeah,
my dad truly had that never give up attitude. So I think that's what his legacy is never give up.
I love it. I love it. And again, your father's proud of you guys. You're honoring his legacy. You
Thank
guys are
you.
doing it right, man. You guys are doing it right. And I'm so sorry I never got a chance to meet him. I would love to shake his hand and just talk to him. You know what I mean? And just kind of have a conversation with him.
Thank you so much. And I hear people say that all the time. And I just want to say, if you've ever meet me, my brother, my sister, you are meeting him through us. And I hope that that carries out in our demeanor and our passion for our father. I had my dad not live through the Vietnam War, because as we all know, he was on the brink of death, I would not have ever been born. And so it was at that moment that I realized that my dad's life was spared for a reason, that I took on the task personally for my own being of helping to carry on his legacy. And so that is my mission in life, is to carry on the great legacy that both of my parents left behind, my mother and my father. And so I do it with passion and I do it with integrity and I do it wholeheartedly because I know that if my dad were alive today, he would still be doing what he's doing, which is inspiring and encouraging people to never give up.
Well, I want to thank you for your time today, being here with me
Thank you.
today. And by to stand by. I want to thank you guys for watching today. You heard the story of Roy P. Benavides, the recipient of the Medal of Honor. Incredible story. You can find his story listed in numerous other interviews. But if you know anyone out there with an incredible story that needs to be heard, shoot me a message. Email me, loopember@gmail. Shoot me an email. I'd love to share the story because just like Miss Yvette here, Benavides Garcia, wants her father's story to be told, you, I'm sure, have someone whose story needs to be told, and I want to tell it. Okay, so by the way, if you like it, subscribe. If you want to share a comment, write something down. Say, hey, I loved it. Hey, ask for these questions next time, and share with you guys, with your folks. Subscribe, share. I appreciate you all. Again, this is Lou Pimber, author of the book Breaking Badly, my very own post-traumatic success story. Hey, you've got a book in you. You should just go write it. Why don't you go do that? Okay. Thank you all for being here today, guys. I appreciate you. Ciao.